I feel like since I'm like among my friends, I'm the music guy. Anytime a song comes on, I'm like, I don't know what this is. People are like, what? You don't know this? I'm like, well, I don't know every song.
Hi, welcome to the guest list with Patrick Hicks. Today I am joined by author Dalla Riva. Chris, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, so you've got your first book coming out, Uncharted Territory, and it has a really cool subtitle, but I can't remember that part. What is the second part?
The subtitle is What Numbers Tell Us About the Biggest Hit Songs and Ourselves.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, it's not just about music, but what the music says about ourselves. What I find really interesting about this book, and I'm really looking forward to it, I heard you talk about this a little on another interview that you did, that a lot of times when we're studying music and music history, we focus on kind of what made it to the canon of like this is important music. So we're studying the 60s, we're going to study the Velvet Underground. But that is not the music that the average person was listening to. And I think a lot of times, like what were actually hit songs get ignored. So your book is diving into these were the number one songs, the most popular songs in the country, at least for one week. So tell me a little bit about that, about kind of that idea, what you think, why you think that is important to study the history of actual number one songs and hit songs.
Yeah, so the book sort of has two angles, and it started because I decided that I was going to listen to every number one hit song in history. Just as I play the guitar, I like music history, so I was like, I'll listen to one song a day. But I've always worked in my day job with data, so I started tracking a bunch of things about these number one hits. This data set ballooned about the songs, noticed some trends, started writing about it, and slowly it turned into this data-driven history of popular music. But to your point, the backbone of the book is that I listened to every number one hit on the Billboard Hot 100 in history. So it started in August 1958. It's changed over the decades, but it still exists to this day. And that is something you see is that, of course, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones have a bunch of number one hits, and we should talk about them because A, they were popular, but B, they also made great songs and they were very influential. But there's a lot of stuff we forget. You can't tell the story of the 60s without talking about, say, Herman's Hermits. Not a band I would hold up as one of the great artists of the 1960s, but they had a couple number one hits. They were very popular. And things that are popular are influential, even if they're forgotten over time. I think a good example of this is it's either the late 50s or the early 60s. There's this number one hit by a group called the Hollywood Argyles called Alley Oop. And the Hollywood Argyles was sort of a fake group. It was just a bunch of studio musicians who came together to record this song, Alley Oop, about a cartoon caveman. And in that, it's actually a pretty cool song, but I would say it's certainly forgotten and it's not part of the 60s canon. But in that song, there's a line, look at that caveman go, which David Bowie would eventually put in his classic song, which I think is part of the rock music canon, Life on Mars, where he's saying, look at those cavemen go. So you have this work that was popular. You probably don't think of it as influential because it's generally forgotten, but because Bowie was probably a kid when that came out and it was popular, it was influential. And things that are popular, whether they're good or bad, influence us and provide a more robust picture, I think, of the past.
Yeah, I thought that was just such a fascinating point because yeah, it might be forgotten, but it exists. It still, had an impact at the time that maybe you don't even realize. And by the way, Herman's Hermits is my mom's favorite band. So, well, I think it's between that and the Monkees, but she was a huge Herman's Hermits fan, and it's always
Yeah.
fascinating getting like music history perspective from her because you always hear like Jimi Hendrix opened for the Monkees and was booed, and you think like, who are these people with no taste booing Jimi Hendrix? That was my mom. My mom had, a little girl going to see the Monkees and was like, who's this guy playing crazy electric guitar? We don't want this. But like, that was the big music of the time. Like that stuff is important, and so I'm really looking forward to diving into that in your book. And I also love, I mean, I've loved your stuff for a long time because it is so data driven and because you ask these really interesting questions about, not just like what are popular songs, but like what is statistically, the most underrepresented song or the most, popular song. I think that's really interesting. There was one you did that was went pretty viral that was like, what is the hip hop verse that the most people know all the words to? That was so interesting. I think your answer was the Fresh Prince theme song. Is it, if I'm, am I remembering that right?
Yeah, that was ultimately what I settled on. I was sort of coming down at the end there to Lose Yourself. I think the first verse of Lose Yourself is very well known. Obviously, Eminem's super popular. And
Yeah.
I feel like that is one of the rap songs that people will know, even if they don't actively listen to hip hop. But then I was just like, you know what? People know television more than anything else. And that theme song is iconic. Other people suggested many other things in the comments, but I still
Well,
really think if you were to go up to a random person on the street and be like, can you get through an entire verse of this rapped verse of this song? Your highest hit rate might be with the Fresh Prince theme song.
yeah. I mean, a lot of people in the comments were kind of like, there's no way it's actually this Run DMC or, this Rakim verse. But like, what I love about your stuff is you weren't like, this is my opinion. It's like, I'm trying to get into the data of getting to like an objective answer for some of these questions, which I think is so different than what most people are doing. And it's very fascinating.
Yeah, and the thing I like about data is, well, first of all, you got to be aware there's certain things you can't measure. So you got to stick to things that we can actually use a quantitative approach to cover. And that's also important to remember because you're like, we can't measure the whole universe, or we could try to, but it might distort things. But at the same time, it at the very least gives us a point to jump off from to argue about. You could say,
Hmm.
I don't agree with that, but at least now we have a place where we can be like, I don't agree with this because of X, Y, and Z, or I don't like your methodology, rather than just being like, this is the answer because I said so. I think data gives us a good jumping off point to argue about things and talk about music more seriously than people would initially think on the surface. Quantification seems to be the opposite of musical joy for a lot of people. But I actually think it's a nice place to start from sometimes.
Yeah. I use Billboard charts a lot because, I'm telling music history and I'm kind of trying to explain why these artists are important. And you get so many comments. They're like, well, I never heard of this band, so they're not important, or, the, this wasn't as important as you're making it sound. And like, that's why I would like to throw those things in. Like, obviously, there's more than sales, but if you haven't heard of an artist that had a number one hit, like that's kind of on you. Like,
Yeah.
they were important at least at the time. Like, there's at least this metric where we can say, you know, like Grammys are obviously super flawed too, but you can at least point to they're nominated for Grammys, so somebody had heard of them. They made some kind of impact, and like they're worth discussing. So
Yeah.
yeah, like
And
it's
usually
a good jumping off point.
usually over time, things also become measurable in the sense that the Velvet Underground, the joke that I've heard is the first album sold 5,000 copies and every person that bought it started a band. But now if you go on Spotify and you look at popular songs from the 60s, I mean, Velvet Underground songs have hundreds of millions of streams. It's not like you have just decided, oh, this band is important. It's like other people have recognized that over time. And there are certain bands or artists that I think are influential in the artist community and never really cross over. In my mind, the Replacements always
Hmm.
strikes me as a band like that. But the Replacements also, it's not obscure. I mean, they've had the anniversary reissues. It's not like there's no measurable success with this band.
All right, let's get into this playlist. So you are from New Jersey. I'm assuming you're born and raised, right?
Born and raised in New Jersey, I had a brief detour in Massachusetts when I went to college and a couple years after, but then I returned to the Garden State in 2019. So I've spent the large majority of my life in various towns of parts of New Jersey, North Jersey specifically. I live pretty close to New York City now.
So what is a song that reminds you of your childhood growing up in New Jersey?
I was just talking to someone about this the other day, and I mentioned some songs by AC/DC. It was one of my first favorite bands. But there was another album I was thinking of that was a staple in our car growing up, and I loved this band. And then I actually saw them live a couple weeks ago. Um, Simple Plan, who was they were part of the pop punk universe in the early 2000s.
Sure.
Um, and their debut album, like I said, was a staple in our car growing up. And they have a song that it's certainly their most popular song at this point, I'm Just a Kid, uh, that I have very, very vivid memories of being driven to school and hearing this song. And I felt like that was they had an album called No Pads, No Helmets, Just Balls. That to me, that felt like the first album that I had a relationship with where I was like, this is mine, this is my music and this is part of who I am. And I feel like even though I'm not super into pop punk these days, there's still a lot of great songs in the pop punk canon that I like. I think it was really the jumping off point for me getting into more guitar music and just getting into music more generally. I had a very large detour into the classic rock universe growing up as a kid, and AC/DC was also really important to that. But I think I'm Just a Kid was one of the core pillars to my early fandom.
Is this music that your parents liked, or were they just playing it in the car for you, or were they into it?
You see, my parents, it's interesting. I've always written songs and played in bands. My parents are not musical. They don't play any instruments. They do not sing or anything, but they always, they certainly both loved music, and there was always music on and playing. Um, and they were not into this. Not that they were against it. They would probably liked it. They liked it because it was on, and they didn't hate what we were listening to. I'm sure compared to some other music that me and my sisters wanted to hear. But I think this was just something that was big with kids of that era. I'm pretty sure there was some connection between Simple Plan and like the Disney Channel or something, because a lot of people who were my age at the time, I think I was probably in second or third grade,
Mm.
were into this band. So no, I guess I must have stumbled upon it on my own, and the CD was purchased with money that was not my own and became a regular in our car's rotation. And like I said, I saw them a couple weeks ago. They were playing in Asbury Park, New Jersey with Bowling for Soup and 303.
Nice.
And my mom and I were recounting how I think we played also a Bowling for Soup CD, these two CDs, I think, until they broke. So I guess she didn't hate it that much.
All right, what is a song you associate with a concert experience?
Yeah, so like I said, I just saw Simple Plan. It was in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And as the Jersey Shore has a pretty rich musical tradition, obviously a lot of it's associated with Bruce Springsteen and his acolytes. But a year ago, there is a, there's a festival every year in Asbury Park called See Here Now. And by every year, I mean for like the last 6 or 7 years. It's a good festival. It's on the beach. And last year, Springsteen was headlining it. So me and all my friends got tickets. And the first of all, the whole day was magical. I mean, I'm a huge Springsteen fan, like every good Jersey boy. But there's another New Jersey band that I love that was playing that day called the Gaslight Anthem.
Oh
And
yeah.
Bruce came out with them, played a song, and then Trey Anastasio from Fish was playing a set. Bruce came out with him, and they played Kitty's Back. And then at the end of the night, the E Street Band played, and it was, you're on the beach in Asbury Park, which was sort of right by this club called the Stone Pony, where he came up playing. And you could tell that he was, it was sort of an emotional thing for him. Like Asbury Park used to be a very, very rundown city, and now it's like sort of a nice place to live. It's a nice little town on the beach. The set they played was unbelievable, but there's a song called Fourth of July, Asbury Park from Springsteen's second record, The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. And hearing him play Fourth of July, Asbury Park on the beach in Asbury Park as like this, homecoming show, it was pretty emotional. It was pretty emotional to watch him as a big fan. It was emotional to be there among this group of people on the beach. It was absolutely perfect weather, a nice breezy September night. I don't think I'll ever have a concert experience like that again. I mean, people with tickets, of course, lined down the beach for as far back as you can see. But then people pulling up in boats and like anchoring to listen, people who I'm sure are just sitting on rooftops in the area who don't have tickets who can still hear. It was a really nice moment, and that song in particular, again, just based on the location, this really sticks out in my mind as a very potent memory.
All right, moving on. What is a song that you associate with a specific activity?
This brought me back to when I would work out in high school in the weight room. It was mostly like kids on the football team, and I didn't play football, so they were in control of the stereo. And there are so many songs that I have like visceral memories associating with this weight room, and it's mostly, early to mid 2000s hip hop and hard rock music, like Down with the Sickness by I think by Disturbed,
Disturbed, yeah.
the things in that universe, not stuff that I would necessarily put on, but this guy I would work out with, he had this, I think it started as a joke, and then it was one of these jokes that became real, that his pump up song, if he really had to lift something heavy, was Fun, Fun, Fun by the Beach Boys, which is like, the sort of this upbeat, little bit cheesy rock and roll song that's clearly lifted from the Chuck Berry catalog. uh, Great song. I love that song. The title describes it perfectly. It is a ton of fun, but that is somehow I associate that song with moving heavy objects when I don't think anyone else on earth does.
No, and I can't imagine. Now I'm gonna have to
But
try. Have to try the pairing.
yeah, I think like I said, I think he tricked himself into believing that this song had some mystical power, while everyone else wanted to hear like Not Afraid by Eminem or whatever other hip hop and
Right.
hard rock songs were popular in and around that time.
Yeah, love it. All right, what is a song that makes you emotional?
To me, this was like the toughest one for me, not because I couldn't come up with an answer, but that there are a lot of songs that make me emotional. I think songs that make me on the verge of crying might be my favorite genre of songs. Um, but I really think the one that it just kept coming to the top of my head was All My Friends by LCD Sound System.
Such a great song. Yeah.
There's this class of songs that I love. I call them songs that I wish would never end. And All My Friends by LCD Sound System fits squarely in that group. It's what, 8 minutes or something. And by the end of the end of that song is just so cathartic because it's just minutes and minutes of building, and it's just this loop of, I don't know, one or two chords, but somehow James Murphy's able to hold your attention. And part of it is the lyricism in that song. It reminds me of feeling young and like the world is endless and trying to make something of yourself, and being confused about what it means to grow up and be around people that you care about. But by the end, I mean, oh my God, if you're not feeling something, I don't know.
That song is incredible. Like sometimes I do fast forward the intro. I'm like, I get it to the singing because it's long. But when you can sit down and be like, I'm gonna take in the whole song, it is quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, there are some guys and gals, I should say, that have the special ability to put something together that's really long and hold your attention the whole time. The one person that always comes to mind for me is Bob Dylan. Has some really long songs that I just
Yeah.
8 minutes in, I'm like, that's it.
Yeah. No, I could listen to Sad Eyed Lady of the Lowlands over and over. Like
Yeah,
that's a song I wish would never end. That's a good category. I like that. It's a song you wish would never end.
yeah. There's a couple Dylan songs in there, and All My Friends is definitely in there for me. And I'm not even a big LCD Sound System fan. It's just that song really does
Hmm.
something to me.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about like, when I'm making these music history videos and I'm kind of trying to justify why I'm doing it. When I did LCD Sound System, I got a lot of people that were like, I'd never heard of this band. And like I think one of the biggest bands of the 2000s, but because whenever you get into the 2000s, it's kind of like you're losing the monoculture, so they're not going to be as well known. But they would be one of the first bands I would think of, and if I had to pick like a song of the 2000s, like that would be on the short list of kind of the defining songs of that era. But
That is interesting. I don't think they ever had they were big enough where they would play like Madison Square Garden. I mean, they were not an obscure
yeah,
band by any stretch, but I feel like they never really had that hit song that sort of crossed over into the mainstream. That's all I can really think of why you wouldn't
Yeah.
be aware of them.
I mean, that's one of the things that it really fascinates me about your book is that you're focusing just on number ones because I think people don't realize like what a big difference it is to have a number one hit like versus just like oh you're a popular band but like when you have that pop crossover I'm thinking of like REM like it's not like REM was some obscure band in the 80s like they were a very popular band that people would have known and they sold records but you get a number one album that just elevates you into this different kind of
Yeah.
stratosphere of pop stardom that is very weird. So yeah, I guess LCD Sound System never quite had that kind of crossover hit.
No, definitely not. It is often weird looking at just number one hits because I've joked with people that if you just look at the number one hits of the 1970s, then the biggest hard rock bands are Grand Funk Railroad and Three Dog Night because they both had like three number one hits. Like, Led Zeppelin wasn't topping, they weren't topping the singles charts. They didn't put out a lot of singles.
Yeah,
Um, so it is interesting to see what people were, as we were talking about, what they were actually listening to at the time.
yeah.
No
There's
disrespect to Grand Funk Railroad.
no, there's a fascinating like kind of trivia that the first ever number one punk album or the first number one album by a punk band in America is Blink 182, and I think it's Take Off Your Pants and Jacket.
I totally believe that. That's like the
And
Ramones. If you, they never charted. I don't think they ever charted a top 40 single. I think over time, Blitzkrieg Bop has probably gone gold or platinum.
right.
But I mean, this is a band that's a perfect example of a band that's super influential and whose popularity they become more popular over time.
All right, moving on. What is a song you associate with a milestone in your life?
I was thinking of when I graduated high school, my friends were really into this band Passion Pit,
Oh yeah.
who's still around.
Very active on Substack, weirdly.
Yes, I actually interviewed him a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
Very, very, very interesting guy.
yeah.
Uh, and his album Gossamer, or the band's album Gossamer, was huge with my friends in high school. And we were trying to go see them at Madison Square Garden one night, and there was just like this freak snowstorm, and we live in northern New Jersey, like pretty close enough to the city where you could just go in for a show and come home on the same night. But our parents wouldn't let us go because of this snowstorm. So I remember us all going. We all decided to go sledding, and we were listening to the album Gossamer. And this song, I think it's the third song on the record called "Carried Away." I think it's quintessential pop music. Like this is what I come for pop music. It's got the huge chorus, and I obviously associate it with that night, but I associate it with like graduating high school, that album in general, but that song more specifically.
That album is incredible. Is that album has Take a Walk on it, right?
Yes, yes, that
Yeah,
album has
it's
Take a
very.
Walk.
I made when both of my daughters when they got to their first birthday, I made little videos of them of kind of like their first year of life milestone, and I scored them learning to walk to Take a Walk, and which obviously like the actual content of the song has nothing to do with like a child taking their first steps, but man, it matched up so good, and like that song will make me cry now because I'm like it just reminds me of my daughters learning to walk for the first time. But I
It's a
agree with
great
you. I
song.
mean, yeah, I mean he writes amazing pop songs, but just in this cool indie electronic kind of format. It's really good. What is a song with some of your favorite lyrics?
I for this one I wanted to go with a Casey Musgraves song. It's called Merry Go Round. And I think it's a good example of what someone once told me that great lyrics are uh they're easy to understand, but they're not obvious. Where the example that I heard with this was someone says the greatest lyric of all time is love hurts because obviously you know what it means, but why should love hurt? It's not an obvious thing, but it's very easy to understand if you've been a human for enough years. But Merry Go Round is Casey Musgraves is she's a great songwriter, very, very deft lyricist, and that's a song that whole song is just a gut punch about being stuck in the same neighborhood and never being able to get out. And there's a lyric during the chorus. Mama's hooked on Mary Kay. Uh, Mama's hooked on Mary Kay. Brother's hooked on Mary Jane, and Daddy's hooked on Mary Three Doors Down. Mary, Mary, quite contrary. We get bored, so we get married. Just like dust, we settle in this ground on this broken merry-go-round. I mean, just so much great wordplay in there,
Hmm.
and you know exactly like it's a very, very clever set of lyrics, but you know exactly what she's getting at, which I think is really, really hard to do as a lyricist.
Yeah, I do think she's so clever. I remember the first time I heard Space Cowboy, I was like, at first I was like, wait, is this the dumbest lyric I've ever heard? But then like the more I listened to it, I was like, you know what? This is actually genius. I need some Space Cowboy.
Funny enough, I literally, when I was looking at the track listing to that record and I saw one called Space Cowboy, I was like, this is gonna be the worst song I've ever heard. But if you put a comma between space and cowboy, apparently it turns it into a very clever lyric.
All right, what is a song that people might be surprised to find out you love?
I watched the movie Office Space for the first time a couple months ago, and one of the gags is like the super white bread kid loves like gangster rap.
Yeah, Ghetto Boys
Uh yes, and
soundtrack.
there's a song on the soundtrack, Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangsta, which if you know anything about me, I am not a gangsta in any way you could possibly conceive of the word. But when I was watching the movie, I was like, this song is it is like entrancing. And I took out I wasn't really familiar with Ghetto Boys, but of course I take out my phone, I Shazam the movie, and I was just like for days I was just listening to this song over and over again. It's like something about this laid back flow and laid back groove that I could not turn off. I don't think anyone would suspect me of being a Ghetto Boys fan, but I really did enjoy a lot of their catalog after I saw that movie and listened to that song.
The Ghetto Boys are amazing, very underrated. And Scarface has some really great solo stuff too. If you haven't dove into that, it's great.
No, I'll have to check that out. Like I said, I was not exposed to them basically at all before the movie. Also, a great movie.
Yeah. I'm surprised that you'd never seen it. Did you know a lot of the stuff like from pop culture when you were watching it?
Yeah, there are a couple of those screenshots from the movie that have been memed endlessly. But
Yeah.
earlier this year, when I was a teenager, I watched a ton of movies. And then I stopped for a while as I was busy doing other things. So this year I decided I was going to try to watch more movies again. At least
Yeah.
one movie every week. And Office Space was just on some lists and it was available on whatever streaming service. So I
Yeah.
threw it on.
One of those movies where it's like you just kind of have to have seen it to understand a lot of references in the world. Like
Yeah,
my wife had never seen Idiocracy when we first started dating. I was like, I'm not saying Idiocracy is the best movie, but I think about it so often that I feel like you need to see this so that when I'm referencing like, the world is turning into Idiocracy, like you'll have to know like
there's
when
so many movies like that where I'm like, I would never try to convince you that this should have won an Oscar, but
All
I absolutely love it.
right, what is a song that you love that somebody else introduced you to?
Very famous song here. My friend Tom and I were in the car, probably senior year of high school, and he said something about My Way by Frank Sinatra, and I was like, I don't know what that is. And he was like, You've never heard My Way? I was like, I don't think so. So we literally, I don't even know where we were. We drove to my parents' house and went to the room that our computer was in just so I could sit down and listen to My Way because he felt like this was uh, fundamental for me to continue surviving.
Yeah, that's kind of mind-blowing, especially being in New Jersey that you'd never heard My Way.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously great song. I mean, I love Sinatra. I now love Sinatra more than I did back then. But I feel like people are often embarrassed if there is some very popular song that they've never heard before. And I feel like since I'm like among my friends, I'm the music guy. Anytime a song comes on, I'm like, I don't know what this is. People are like, what? You don't know this? I'm like, well, I don't know every song.
Right.
So don't feel bad if you've never heard My Way by Frank Sinatra. You should listen to it, or any other cultural touchstones. Um, just go check it out. There's no time better than today than to discover the joys of Frank Sinatra's epic voice.
Yeah, you had a great Substack. article that it also went kind of viral about, was it your grandma like saw Frank Sinatra?
Yeah, this is not the most popular thing I've ever put on Substack, but if I ever see someone in real life who has read anything I've written, it's always the thing they bring up is my grandmother always claimed that Frank Sinatra performed at her high school. And I'm from North Jersey. My grandmother's from a town that's like 15 minutes from where Sinatra's from, which is actually where I live now, Hoboken, New Jersey. So this was not a far-fetched thing that Frank Sinatra could have performed when my grandmother was in high school. Like the ages sort of lined up. And my grandmother wasn't really known to make stuff up. So, but after she died, I was like, I wonder if there's any evidence of this. And I
Yeah.
just went on this journey to try to find it. I won't spoil the ending because I think there's a good punchline, but it was, I learned a lot of things along the way. But sometimes it's hard to track things down, even if you're pretty sure that they happened and you have
Yeah.
multiple people telling you that this did indeed happen.
I mean, it is fascinating to go on those like kind of historical deep dives because like you can't trust memory. So those, things that people say for sure happened because they remember sometimes is not backed up by the evidence. So
Yeah, I mean my grandmother was
good
in
to
her
explore.
90s, so I was like, oh, maybe she's misremembering something or conflating memories. And
Hmm.
then after my grandmother died, her sister was still alive, but she was also in her 90s, and she was like, oh yeah, he totally played at the high school. But still, I was like, why can, and this took, what I will say is this journey went on for months and months. And I was like, I feel like this should, like, I reached out to the high school, Belleville High School. I was like, do you have any record of this? I looked through yearbooks. There was nothing. And I was like, if there are multiple people who claim this happened, why would it not be in the yearbook? Why would the high school not brag about this or at least have it noted down somewhere? So it was a very
Yeah.
educational journey, but
Yeah, definitely go track that down and read it. And yeah, if you're watching this and you are not subscribed to Chris's newsletter, it's the best music newsletter on Substack. You got to check it out. I'm always amazed by your consistency to get these things out because I always wish I wrote more and I don't know how you find the time.
I I think my superpower is if I say I'm gonna I was like years ago, I was like, I'll write one newsletter a week. Like I'm very good at sticking with something, which I'm not gonna say that every week the output is as good as every single week, but like sometimes you don't know what's gonna hit. So I'm always like, I'll stick to the schedule, I'll put something
Yeah,
out. See if I try to do the same with TikTok. I feel like you're probably much more consistent there, but I'm sure you never know what people are gonna connect with.
very true. Very true. All right, what is a song that you introduced somebody else to that you love?
When I would make mixtapes in high school, I was actually went back to my old iTunes library when I saw this question. I still have all these mixtapes made. It's just like the person's name. I would almost always put the song Romeo and Juliet by Dire Straits on these mixtapes. I don't know exactly why. I do love the song. Um, I think it's a great song. I think it's a good example of like great fingerstyle guitar, which I love. It's got nice storytelling. Mark Knopfler sort of has this plain voice, but it works very well for most of the Dire Straits catalog, but also for this song specifically. And I also love in this song how he makes reference to the 60s hit when he says something, hey la, my girlfriend's back,
Oh yeah,
which is and I love those little Easter eggs or allusions to other musical works. I love being able to pick up on that stuff. I think
yeah.
that all those things together are why I love this song, but I went and listened to it again last night and still holds up. My dad introduced me to that song, but I've been spreading it around for years if Mark Knopfler's listening.
All right, what is the most recent song that you've fallen in love with?
I'll give you a couple because I couldn't decide. New-ish songs. Uh, I saw Beach Bunny a couple months ago in concert, and I was not really familiar with their work beforehand. My friend Seamus is just always inviting me to shows, and I'll almost go to any show if this ticket's under $100. This was certainly under $100, and he was actually going for the opener, Cool Kids, who's a cool band.
Hmm.
But I really came to enjoy this Beach Bunny song called Clueless. One of those other songs that makes me very emotional. The lyrics are sort of a gut punch. And Beach Bunny is also sort of, I think they're interesting because sort of in the indie rock sphere, verging on punk or in the punk universe at times. But their music is really connected on TikTok, and they're I think much more popular than I would expect them to be if I had just listened to their music, which I think is sort of cool. I think it's cool when artists like that get to have a bigger audience than you might initially expect. Clueless was from their latest record. It's a great song. A little bit more poppy. There's this kid, I think he's only 20, named Somber.
Oh
He has
yeah.
this radio hit right now called Undressed, which I think it's exquisite songwriting. He just put out his debut record, I think his debut album. I thought it was pretty good. But I've been coming back to that song a lot. It's got a nice little guitar motif that loops sort of throughout the song.
I do like
Uh,
that song. Yeah. He's kind of standing out to me in terms of like the new, like the Alex Warrens of the world. I
uh,
prefer somber.
yeah, yeah. I also prefer some. I don't know what's going on with the Alex Warren stuff. Um, that's a good example. That's a number one song right now, and it's topped the charts for a bunch of weeks. And I'm like,
Yeah.
who the heck is listening? Who's listening to this? Uh, though my mom did send me my mom will sometimes send me a picture of the radio, like the radio shows what song is playing.
Yeah.
And she did send me that one. She was like, "Have you heard this?" Which usually means that, okay, to your point when your mom you said your mom was keeping Herman's
Yeah.
Hermits alive.
Oh yeah.
My mom might be doing the same for Alex Warren. And I wanted to give an older song because I feel like I often discover new stuff and old stuff. And I listened to
Yeah.
this podcast episode about Judy Sill, who was a singer-songwriter in the 70s, had a tragic end to her life. But she has this song called Jesus Was a Crossmaker
Hmm.
that I think is tremendous. I got in an argument with my friend over it because I was like, you have to listen to this. Like, when I first discovered it, I was like, I sent it to him. I was like, this is the greatest song I've ever heard, which happens to me a lot the first time I hear something that I really
Yeah.
like. And he was like, this isn't good. And we had an exchange of words. I still think it's tremendous, but a nice little folksy song, which is in many ways maybe my favorite 70s singer-songwriters. That's my bread and butter.
Yeah.
So I
I
wasn't
don't know that
familiar
song.
with
I gotta
their
check it out.
yeah, it's a cool song. I actually asked people on Substack a couple months ago. I was like, what's the best song with Jesus in the title? When I
Hmm.
was obsessed with this song, Jesus Was a Crossmaker.
Yeah. That's a great
Um,
question.
yeah, that was my submission. Lots of like sort of secular songs about Jesus is what
Yeah.
I
I'm
learned.
thinking Velvet Underground has a song called Jesus, and yeah, there's a lot. Jesus
Yeah,
Don't Want Me for a Sunbeam. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good question. All right, one bonus question since you've got a book coming out all about number one hits. What is your favorite number one hit that you listen to?
So I often joke that if you ask me what's the greatest number one hit, I would say I don't know, but it was probably either written in Detroit or by someone from Sweden because you get all the Motown songs and then, ABBA and Max Martin and all
Yeah.
the great Swedish songwriters. I still, if I'm, I think I Want You Back by the Jackson Five is pop perfection. 11-year-old Michael Jackson is operating in clearly a different stratosphere than the rest of us. I don't even know how you do that at that age. The
Yeah.
song still stands up. Something more obscure that I also talk about this song a lot. Number one hit, completely forgotten, has left basically no cultural footprint, called Want Ads by
Oh,
Honeycomb.
Honeycomb, yeah. I know
For,
this is kind of the song that got you in touch with like the book deal, right?
yeah, yeah, again, I always tell people about this song because I'm like, it's like a great, funky, soulful
Incredible song.
70s
Yeah.
song. Great vocals. The lyrics are sort of funny about,
Sampled by the Avalanches on
yes,
their
I
second
think
record.
that is probably its only cultural, evidence of cultural relevance is it's sampled by the Avalanches. But yeah, I
Yeah.
posted a TikTok about this song on my quest to make it more popular. And Fred Bronson, who if you're into number one hits, he has a book called the Billboard Book of Number One Hits, which every page is just the story of every number one song. He wrote for Billboard for ages. He was actually on American Idol occasionally
Oh,
as like a talking head.
oh, cool.
And he saw it and he sent me a message. And I was like, I've been pitching this book for years to people. No one seems to be interested. And he was like, oh, I'll connect you with my editor when he was done with the project he was working on. And finally, that was the editor I guess I was looking for. So it ended up working out.
Yeah.
So I always tell people to shout into the void about obscure songs that they
Right.
think other
Right.
people should be hearing.
Yeah, you never know what's going to be like the thing that you put out that connects with the right person. So,
No, you don't. That's
yeah.
a top thing I've learned over the years is you could put the polish on something for 6 months and put it out and no one cares about it. And it's something you toss off in an hour is what gets
Yep.
the people going.
All right. Well, Chris, this was so great. Thank you so much for doing this. Congrats on the book coming out. I can't wait. Anything else you have to promote right now?
No, I'm in book promotion mode, so I'm an easy guy to find online, Dalla Riva. The book's called Uncharted Territory, also should be easy to find. And my newsletter is called Can't Get Much Higher. So if you find me anywhere, you will find the book. And if you cannot find it, you can reach out to me and I will 100% respond to solve your book buying issues.
All right, Chris, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
You've heard the stories, now hear the songs. Go to wherever you listen to music, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, and you can listen to today's guest's personalized playlist if you search for the guest list with Patrick Hicks.